Okay. This is going to be Etidorpha Chapter 12. Chapter 12. A Cavern Discovered, Biswell's Hill. We stopped that night at a tavern in Smithland. Leaving this place after dinner the next day on foot, we struck through the country into the bottom lands of the Cumberland River. Traveling leisurely, lingering for hours in the course of a circuitous tramp of only a few miles. Although it was the month of December, the climate was mild and balmy. In my former home, a similar time of year would have been marked with snow, sleet, and ice. And I could not but draw a contrast between the two localities. How different also the scenery from that of my native state. Great timber trees, oak, poplar, hickory, were in majestic possession of a large tracts of territory, in the solitude of which man, so far as evidences of his presence were concerned, had never before trodden. From time to time we passed little clearings that probably were to be enlarged to thrifty plantations in the future, and finally we crossed the Cumberland River. That night we rested with Mr. Joseph Watts, a wealthy and cultured landowner who resided on the river's bank. After leaving his home the next morning, we journeyed slowly, very slowly, my guide seemingly passing with reluctance into the country. He had become a very pleasant companion, and his conversation was very entertaining. We struck the sharp point of a ridge the morning we left Mr. Watt's hospitable house. It was 4 or 5 miles distant, but on the opposite side of the Cumberland from Smithland. Here a steep bluff broke through the bottom land to the river's edge, the base of the bisected point being washed by the Cumberland River, which had probably cut its way through the stony mineral of this ridge in ages long past. We climbed to its top and sat upon the pinnacle, and from that point of commanding observation I drank in the beauties of the scene around me. The river at our feet wound gracefully before us, and disappeared in both directions, its extremes dissolving in a bed of forest. A great black bluff, far up the stream, rose like a mountain upon the left side of the river. Bottom lands were about us, and hills appeared across the river from, in the far distance, towards the Tennessee River. With regret, I finally drew my eyes from the vision, and we resumed the journey. We followed the left bank of the river to the base of the Black Bluff, Biswell's Hill, a squatter called it, and then skirted the side of that hill, passing along precipitous stone bluffs and among stunted cedars. Above us towered cliff over cliff almost perpendicularly. Below us rolled the river. I was deeply impressed by the changing beauties of this strange Kentucky scenery, but marveled at the fact that while I became light-hearted and enthusiastic, my guide grew correspondingly despondent and gloomy. From time to time he lapsed into thoughtful silence, and once I caught his eye directed toward me in a manner that I inferred to imply either pity or envy. We passed Biswell's Bluff and left the Cumberland River at its upper extremity, where another small creek empties into the river. Thence, after ascending the creek some distance, we struck across the country, finding it undulating and fertile, with here and there a small clearing. During this journey, we either camped out at night or stopped with a resident, when one was to be found in that sparsely settled country. Sometimes there were exasperating intervals between our meals, but we did not suffer, for we carried with us supplies of food, such as cheese and crackers purchased in Smithland for emergencies. We thus proceeded a considerable distance into Livingston County, Kentucky. I observed remarkable sinks in the earth, sometimes cone-shaped, again precipitous, These cavities were occasionally of considerable size and depth, and they were more numerous in the uplands than in the bottoms. They were somewhat like the familiar sinkholes of New York State, but monstrous in comparison. The first that attracted my attention was near the Cumberland River, just before we reached Biswell's Hill. It was about 40 feet deep and 30 in diameter, with precipitous stone sides. Shrubbery growing therein in exceptional spots where loose earth had collected on the shelves of stone that cropped out along its rugged sides. The bottom of the depression was flat and fertile, covered with a luxuriant mass of vegetation. On one side of the base of the gigantic bowl, a cavern struck down into the earth. I stood upon the edge of this funnel-like sink and marveled at its peculiar appearance. A spirit of curiosity, such as often influences men when an unusual natural scene presents itself, possessed me. I clambered down, swinging from brush to brush, and stepping from shelving rock to shelving rock until I reached the bottom of the hollow. And placing my hand above the black hole in its center, I perceived that a current of cold air was rushing therefrom upward. I probed with a long stick, but the direction of the opening was tortuous, and would not admit of examination in that manner. I dropped a large pebble stone into the orifice. The pebble rolled and clanked down, and at last the sound died away in the distance. I wish that I could go into the cavity as the stone has done, and find the secrets of this cave, I reflected, the natural love of exploration possessing me as it probably does most men. My companion above, seated on the brink of the stone wall, replied to my thoughts. "Your wish shall be granted. You have requested that which has already been laid out for you. You will explore where few men have passed before, and will have the privilege of following your destiny into a realm of natural wonders. A fertile field of investigation awaits you, such as will surpass your most vivid imaginings. Come and seat yourself beside me, for it is my duty now to tell you something about the land we are approaching, the cavern fields of Kentucky." Chapter 13. The Punch Bowls and Caverns of Kentucky, into the Unknown Country. This part of Kentucky borders a field of caverns that reaches from near the state of Tennessee to the Ohio River, and from the mouth of the Cumberland eastward to and beyond the center of the state. This great area is of irregular outline, and as yet has been little explored. Underneath the surface are layers of limestone and sandstone rock, the deposits ranging from 10 to 150 feet in thickness, and often great masses of conglomerate appear. This conglomerate sometimes caps the ridges and varies in thickness from a few feet only to 60 or even 100 feet. It is of a diversified character, sometimes largely composed of pebbles cemented together by iron ore into compact beds, while again it passes abruptly into the gritty sandstone or a fine-grained compact rock of destitute of pebbles. Sometimes the conglomerate rests directly on the limestone, but in the section about us, more often argillaceous shales or veins of coal intervene, and occasionally inferior and superior layers of conglomerate are separated by a bed of coal. In addition, lead-bearing veins now and then crop up, the crystals of galena being disseminated through masses of fluorspar, calc-spar, limestone, and clay, which fill fissures between tilted walls of limestone and hard quartzose sandstone. Valleys, hills, and mountains grow out of this remarkable crust. Rivers and creeks flow through and under it, in crevices either directly upon the bedstone or over deposits of clay which underlie it. In some places, beds of coal or slate alternate with layers of the lime rock. In others, the interspace is clay and sand. Sometimes the depth of the several limestone and conglomerate deposits is great, and they are often honeycombed by innumerable transverse and diagonal spaces. Water drips have here and there washed out the more friable earth and stone, forming grottos which are as yet unknown to men. but which will be discovered to be wonderful and fantastic beyond anything of a like nature now familiar. In other places, cavities exist between shells of rock that lie one above the other, monstrous openings caused by the erosive action of rivers now lost, but that have flowed during unnumbered ages past. Great parallel valleys and gigantic chambers, one over the other, remaining to tell the story of these former torrents. Occasionally, the weight of a portion of the disintegrating rock above becomes too great for its tensile strength, and the material crumbles and falls, producing caverns, sometimes reaching so near to the earth's surface as to cause sinks in its crust. These sinks, when first formed, as a rule present clear rocky fractures, and immediately after their formation, there is usually a waterway beneath. In the course of time, soil collects on their sides. They become cone-shaped hollows from the downslidings of earth, and then vegetation appears on the living soil. Trees grow within them, and in many places the sloping sides of the great earth bowels of this nature are, after untold years, covered with virgin forests, magnificent timber trees growing on soil that has been stratified over and upon decayed monarchs of the forest whose remains, embedded in the earth, speak of the ages that have passed since the convulsions that have made the depressions which, notwithstanding the accumulated debris, are still 100 feet more or more in depth. If the drain or exit at the vortex of one of these sinks becomes clogged, which often occurs, the entire cavity fills with water and a pond results. Again, a slight orifice reaching far beneath the earth's surface may permit the soil to be gradually washed into a subterranean creek, and thus are formed great bowls, like funnels sunk in the earth, Kentucky punch bowls. Take the country about us, especially towards the Mammoth Cave, and for miles beyond. The landscape in certain localities is pitted with this description of sinks, some recent, others very old. Many are small, but deep. Others are large and shallow. Ponds, often of great depth, curiously enough, overflowing and giving rise to a creek, are to be found on a ridge telling of underground supply springs, not outlets, beneath. Chains of such sinks, like a row of huge funnels, often appear. The soil between them is slowly washed through their exit into the river, flowing in the depths below, and as the earth that separates them is carried away by the subterranean streams, the bowls coalesce, and a ravine, closed at both ends, results. Along the bottom of such a ravine, a creek may flow, rushing from its natural tunnel at one end of the line and disappearing in a gulf at the other. The stream begins in mystery and ends in unfathomed darkness. Near Marion, Hurricane Creek thus disappears. Near Marion, Hurricane Creek thus disappears, and, so far as men know, is lost to sight forever. Near Cridersville, in this neighborhood, a valley such as I have described takes in the surface floods of a large tract of country. The waters that run down its sides during a storm form a torrent, and fence rails, timbers, and other objects are gulped into this chasm, where the creek plunges into the earth, and they never appear again. This part of Kentucky is the most remarkable portion of the known world, and although now neglected, in a time to come is surely destined to an extended distinction. I have referred only to the surface, the skin formations of this honeycombed labyrinth, the entrance to the future wonderland of the world. Portions of such a superficial cavern maze have been traversed by man in the ramifications known as the Mammoth Cave. But deeper than man has yet explored, the subcutaneous structure of that series of caverns is yet to be investigated. The Mammoth Cave, as now traversed, is simply a superficial series of grottos and passages overlaying the deeper cavern field that I have described. The explored chain of passages is of great interest to men. It is true, but of minor importance compared to others yet unknown, being, in fact, the result of mere surface erosion. The river that bisects the cave, just beneath the surface of the earth, and known as Echo River, is a miniature stream. There are others, more magnificent, that flow majestically, far, far beneath it. And we descend into the earth in that locality. As we descend into the earth in that locality, caverns multiply in number and increase in size, retaining the general configuration of those I have described. The layers of rock are thicker, the intervening spaces broader, and the spaces stretch in increasingly expanded chambers for miles, while high above each series of caverns the solid ceilings of stone arc and interarc. Sheltered under these subterranean alcoves are streams, lakes, rivers, and waterfalls. Near the surface of the earth, such waters often teem with aquatic life, and some of the caves are inhabited by species of birds, reptiles, and mammals as yet unknown to men. Creatures possessed of senses and organs that are different from any we find with the surface animals, and also apparently defective in particulars that would startle persons acquainted only with creatures that live in the sunshine. It is a world beneath a world within a world. My guide abruptly stopped. I sat entranced, marveling at the young, old adept's knowledge, admiring his accomplishments. I gazed into the cavity that yawned beneath me and imagined its possible, but to me invisible secrets, enraptured with the thought of searching into them. Who would not feel elated at the prospect of an exploration such as I foresaw might be pursued in my immediate future? I had often been charmed with narrative descriptions of discoveries and book accounts of scientific investigations, but I had never pictured myself as a participant in such fascinating enterprises. Indeed, I cried exultingly. Lead me to this wonderland, show me the entrance to this subterranean world, and I promise willingly to do as you bid. Bravo, he replied. Your heart is right, your courage sufficient. I have not disclosed a 1,000th part of the wonders which I have knowledge of and which await your research, and probably I have not gained even an insight into the mysteries that, if your courage permits, you will be privileged to comprehend. Your destiny lies beyond, far beyond that which I have pictured or experienced, and I, notwithstanding my opportunities, have no conception of its end. For at the critical moment my heart faltered, I can therefore only describe the beginning. Thus, at the lower extremity of Biswell's Hill, I was made aware of the fact that within a short time I should be separated from my sympathetic guide, and that it was to be my duty to explore alone, or in other company, some portion of these Kentucky caverns, deeps, and I longed for the beginning of my underground journey. Heavens! How different would have been my future life could I then have realized my position. Would that I could have seen the end. After a few days of uneventful travel, we rested one afternoon in a hilly country that before us appeared to be more rugged, even mountainous. We had wandered leisurely and were now at a considerable distance from the Cumberland River. The aim of my guide being, as I surmise, to evade a direct approach to some object of interest, which I must not locate exactly, and yet which I shall try to describe accurately enough for identification by a person familiar with the topography of that section. We stood on the side of a stony sloping hill, back of which spread a wooded, undulating valley. I remember to have passed along a creek in that valley, I remarked, looking back over our pathway. It appeared to rise from this direction, but the source ends abruptly in this chain of hills. The stream is beneath us, he answered, advancing a few paces. He brought to my attention on the hillside an opening in the earth. This aperture was irregular in form, about the diameter of a well, and descended perpendicularly into the stony crust. I leaned far over the orifice and heard the gurgle of water rushing beneath. The guide dropped a heavy stone into the gloomy shaft, and in some seconds a dull splash announced its plunge into underground water. Then he leaned over the stony edge and, could I be mistaken, seemed to signal to someone beneath. But it must be my imagination on my part, I argued to myself, even against my very sense of sight. Rising and taking me by the hand, my guardian spoke. Brother, we approach the spot where you and I must separate. I serve my masters, and am destined to go where I shall next be commanded. You will descend into the earth as you have recently desired to do. Here we part, most likely forever. This rocky fissure will admit the last ray of sunlight on your path. My heart failed. How often are we courageous in daylight and timid by night? Men unflinchingly face in sunshine dangers at which they shudder in the darkness. How am I to descend into that abyss? I gasped. The sides are perpendicular, the depth is unknown. Then I cried in alarm, the sense of my distrust deepening. Do you mean to drown me? Is it for this you have led me astray from my native state, from my friends, home, and kindred? You have enticed me into this wilderness. I have been decoyed, and like a foolish child have willingly accompanied my destroyer. You feared to murder me in my distant home. The earth could not have hidden me. Niagara even might have given up my body to dismay the murderers. In this underground river, in the wilds of Kentucky, all traces of my existence will disappear forever. I was growing furious. My frenzied eyes searched the ground for some missile of defense. By strange chance, someone had left on that solitary spot a rude weapon, providentially dropped for my use, I thought. It was a small iron bolt or bar, somewhat rusted. I threw myself upon the earth, and as I did so, picked this up quickly and secreted it within my bosom. Then I arose and resumed my stormy denunciation. You have played your part well. You have led your unresisting victim to the sacrifice. But if I am compelled to plunge into this black grave, you shall go with me. I shrieked in desperation, and suddenly threw my arms around the gentle adept, intending to hurl him into the chasm. At this point, I felt my hands seized from behind in a cold, clammy, irresistible embrace. My fingers were loosed by a strong grasp, and I turned to find myself confronted by a singular-looking being who quietly said, You are not to be destroyed. We wish only to do your bidding. The speaker stood in a stooping position, with his face towards the earth, as if to shelter it from the sunshine. He was less than 5 feet in height. His legs and arms were bare, and his skin, the color of light blue putty, glistened in the sunlight like the slimy hide of a water dog. He raised his head, and I shuddered in affright as I beheld that his face was not of that of a human. His forehead extended in an unbroken plane from crown to cheekbone, and the chubby tip of an abortive nose without nostrils, a short projection near the center of the level ridge, which represented a countenance. There was no semblance of an eye, for there were no sockets, yet his voice was singularly perfect. His face, if face it could be called, was wet, and water dripped from all parts of his slippery person. Yet, repulsive as he looked, I shuddered more at the remembrance of the touch of that cold, clammy hand than at the sight of his figure, for a dead man could not have chilled me as he had done, with his sappy skin, from which the moisture seemed to ooze as from the hide of a water lizard. Turning to my guide, this freak of nature said softly, I have come in obedience to the signal. I realized at once that alone with these two I was powerless, and that to resist would be suicidal. Instantly my effervescing passion subsided, and I expressed no further surprise at this sudden and remarkable apparition, but mentally acquiesced. I was alone and helpless. Rage gave place to inertia in the despondency that followed the realization of my hopeless condition. The grotesque newcomer, who though sightless possessed a strange instinct, led us to the base of a hill a few hundred feet away. And there, gushing into the light from the rocky bluff, I saw a magnificent stream, issuing many feet in width. This was the headwaters of the mysterious brook that I had previously noticed. It flowed from an archway in the solid stone, springing directly out of the rock-bound cliff, beautiful and picturesque in its surroundings. The limpid water, clearly and sparkling, issued from the unknown source that was typical of darkness, but the brook of crystal leaped into a world of sunshine, light, and freedom. Brother, said my companion, this spring emerging from this prison of earth images to us what? of earth images to us what humanity will be when the prisoning walls of ignorance that now enthrall him are removed. Man has heretofore relied chiefly for his advancement, both mental and physical, on knowledge gained from so-called unscientific explorations and researches with matter. From material studies rather than spiritual, all his investigations having been confined to the crude, coarse substance of the surface of the globe, spiritualistic investigations, unfortunately, are considered by scientific men too often as reaching backward only. The religions of the world clasp hands with and lean upon the dead past, it is true, but point to a living future. Man must yet search by the agency of senses and spirit the unfathomed mysteries that lie beneath his feet and over his head, and he who refuses to bow to the Creator and honor his handiwork discredits himself. When this work is accomplished, as it yet will be, the future man, able then to comprehend the problem of life in its broader significance, drawing from all directions the facts necessary to his mental advancement, will have reached a state in which he can enjoy bodily comfort and supreme spiritual perfection, while he is yet an earthbound mortal. In hastening this consummation, it is necessary that an occasional human life should be lost to the world. But such sacrifices are noble, yes, sublime. Because contributing to the future exaltation of our race, the secret workers in the sacred order of which you are still a member have ever taken an important part in furthering such a system of evolution. This feature of our work is unknown to brethren of the ordinary fraternity, and the individual research of each secret messenger is unguessed by the craft at large. Hence, it is that the open workers of our order, those initiated by degrees only, who in lodge rooms carry on their beneficent labors among men, have had no hand other than as agents in your removal, and no knowledge of your present or future movements. Their function is to keep together our organization on earth, and from them only an occasional member is selected, as you have been, to perform special duties in certain adventurous studies. Are you willing to go on this journey of exploration, and are you brave enough to meet the trials you have invited? Again my enthusiasm arose, and I felt the thrill experienced by an investigator who stands on the brink of an important discovery and needs but courage to advance, and I answered, yes. Then farewell. This archway is the entrance that will admit you into your arcanum of usefulness. This mystic brother, though a stranger to you, has long been apprised of our coming, and it was he who sped me on my journey to seek you, and who has since been waiting for us, and is to be your guide during the first stages of your subterranean progress. He is a friend, and if you trust him, will protect you from harm. You will find the necessaries of life supplied, for I have traversed part of your coming road. That part I therefore know. But, as I have said, you are to go deeper into the unexplored, yes, into and beyond the beyond, until finally you will come to the gateway that leads into the unknown country. That is the end of chapters 12 and 13.